Hello, Square Root Justice family. I am Rita Latrice coming to you live with today's news. Bill Cosby is a free man. And I heard that this morning. I did put a post out on my personal and my Facebook page, Square Root Justice. And so I'm coming to you real quickly. I decided to look up the court opinion as it came down today out of the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court concerning Bill Cosby. So, as we know, there have been mixed emotions, mixed feelings in the past about the allegations that came forward alleging the sexual misconduct or sexual allegations against Bill Cosby, followed by his conviction. And then there was talk of him giving a prior civil deposition where some incriminating statements were given during that civil deposition, and how could he be brought to trial. So I took time today to look up the Supreme Court opinion that was written by Justice White, W-E-C-H-T, and I found it very interesting. And I know in the climate that we're in, dealing with the social injustices, which is what birthed my platform, I read through the entire opinion. And let me put it out there, I am no attorney. I am no paralegal. I am just using my previous background in law enforcement. And so what I found was very interesting, and it gives a lot of insight. We rely on our news anchors to give us the information and come forward, but rarely do we as regular lay people or individuals go and search and look out the opinions of the court as to why decisions are handed down the way they were. So because we're dealing with a high profile figure that's been in the light and in our homes on the TV screens for, decades previously, Mr. William Henry Cosby, as we know him by Bill Cosby, William Henry Cosby Jr., we know him by Bill Cosby from The Cosby Show, I thought I would bring you my assessment or my analysis. But first, let's get into some background. So this helps us to understand why some of the injustices that go on, but I'm looking at it from a different perspective as what we're dealing with today. So just to give you a little bit of background about this case, other than what we've seen in the news, I have the Supreme Court opinion right before me, and I'm just going to read you a little bit of it, the intro, to give you background as to how we got here today with Bill Cosby being freed from prison. So in 2005, Montgomery County District Attorney Bruce Castor learned that Andrea Constand had reported that William Cosby had sexually assaulted her in 2004 at his Cheltenham residence. Along with his top deputy prosecutor and experienced detectives, District Attorney Castor thoroughly investigated Constand's claim. In evaluating the likelihood of a successful prosecution of Cosby, the district attorney, that being Castor, foresaw difficulties with the victim's credibility as a witness based in part upon her decision not to file a complaint properly. DA Castor further determined that a prosecution would be frustrated because there was no corroborating forensic evidence and because testimony from other potential claimants against Cosby likely was inadmissible under governing laws of evidence for the state of Pennsylvania. The collective weight of these considerations led DA Castor to conclude that unless Cosby confessed, there was insufficient credible and admissible evidence upon which any charge against Mr. Cosby related to the Constand incident could be proven beyond reasonable doubt. Seeking, quote, some measure of justice for Constand, DA Castor decided that the Commonwealth would decline to prosecute Cosby for the incident involving Constand, thereby allowing Cosby to be forced to testify in a subsequent civil litigation or action under penalty of perjury without the benefits of the Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination. That is the crux and the meat of why he got off and he's out of prison today. If I continue to read from this opinion, unable to invoke any right not to testify to the civil proceedings, Cosby relied upon the district attorney's declination and proceeded to provide 4 sworn depositions during civil litigation matters. During those depositions, Cosby made several incriminating statements. That brings us to this matter. All pretty much started around between 2003 2005 when Constand met, she was working at Temple University, and although I say Temple University, the university has nothing to do with this. I'm just giving you background. But she was an employee there in the athletics department, had a chance to meet Bill Cosby, went to his residence on several occasions, decided to leave, and went back to Canada to pursue other professional matters she did. So how did this come about? We began really hearing about it, as I did, really around 2015, 2016, when there were media reports that charges were going to be brought against Bill Cosby. And that's when we seen other victims come stand alongside Constand in bringing forth the allegations of how they had been treated by Bill Cosby. So what was interesting as I read this opinion that was handed down today is that one thing I want to discuss, and I wrote some notes down, so forgive me for looking up and down. But one thing that I found interesting in the opinion is that the justice says that prosecutors are more than participants in our criminal justice system. As we explain in Commonwealth versus Clancy, prosecutors inhibit three distinct and equally critical roles. They are officers of the court, advocates for victims, and administrators of justice. And I found this very critical because he further stated that prosecutors are duty bound to pursue equal and impartial justice. And so as we look at the cases that have been going on, that's been in the media, with the killing of our brothers, our black men, and we look at some prosecutors stepping forward to take on cases and others stating that there is no case. These three inhibit distinct qualities of prosecutors. It's not just for prosecutors in the state of Pennsylvania where this case occurred, but this is everywhere. When they say they're duty bound, that's the oath that they have taken. And so I look at this as we have two justice systems. One being the law containing the amendments in which civilians and individuals are entitled to, and then other looking at discretionary power of prosecutors. And also what's most important too is that the victims having the courage to come forward, which she did, albeit it may have been a year later when she first filed her complaint, but having victims to come forward. And it's important to know that the other victims that came forward, although the allegations occurred or whatever happened was in maybe the 70s, the 80s, 60s, it was decades before this litigation actually started. The bravery and the courage for a victim to come forward to report a sexual assault or any type of crime shall not be negated or shall not be overlooked, because that was a secrecy that they held within them, and they decided to come forward and stand alongside Constand. So two main issues here at the crux of this decision as far as why Bill Cosby was released. And let me go further into background. So the DA Castor, when he decided that there wasn't enough evidence to move forward with criminal charges, he came out with a public release or a news statement, verbal, and stating that there would be no charges brought against Bill Cosby. Although that news release was signed or unsigned by Castor, I believe it was signed, there was nothing stated from reading this opinion that it was in the official record where there was no declination of charges brought by Bill Cosby. And the approach that the DA at that time took was that he would not prosecute because of insufficient evidence, not having enough, as it is cited here in the opinion, enough evidence to move forward where they felt that a criminal conviction would be attained. However, he decided in order to try to get justice for the victim that came forward initially to report this, that he would basically take away the Fifth Amendment right of Bill Cosby in the civil part, meaning the civil litigation where Cosby gave 4 interviews and depositions, and what came from those depositions were incriminating statements. But however, Cosby relied on the DA's decision not to prosecute him criminally, which enabled Cosby to feel that he was safeguarded. and that he could not be prosecuted, and that's why he gave the statements and participated in the depositions, which brought forth criminal self-incriminating statements concerning the drugs, quaaludes. I want to say drugs, but quaaludes that were used upon women that he desired to have a, I would say, sexual occurrence with, in whatever form or fashion that would be, according to the report. So he gave the depositions, the incriminating statements were made. However, in 2015, during the civil litigation when it was going forward, and I believe that Constand received $3.8 million from her civil deposition, civil litigation, excuse me, not the deposition part of it. But what's interesting is that when the DA decided not to bring charges against Cosby and it moved over to the civil realm, is that basically Cosby was almost forced by not having no criminal prosecutions, and how the prosecutor looked at it was that since there were no prosecutions, in order to try to get some form of justice for the victim, then Cosby would be propelled to testify and give depositions and be truthful and honorable in the depositions, and that's what brought about the incriminating statements. Fast forward to 2015, during the civil part of it, the then prosecutor, Castor, was no longer in office, but a new prosecutor came on the scene, and when looked at that, decided to bring charges, and the lower court, which is the trial court that determined fact, they stated that charges could be brought forward because they viewed it as there was no legal binding agreement between the county, the Commonwealth for Pennsylvania, and how Cosby had agreed that he would not be held criminally liable, but that he would testify via depositions in the civil case. So with the trial court saying no, that's a no-go, that is what proceeded to the first, I believe it was I'm not sure if it was a mistrial or he wasn't found guilty, but on the second trial he was found guilty and sentenced to state prison. Fast forward to today, him being released. How do we get there? The Supreme Court looked at two things. So Cosby and his team filed an appeal, and the two issues at hand were, quote, uncharged misconduct involving sexual contact with other women and the use of quaaludes admitted at trial via women's live testimony and Cosby's civil deposition testimony. So with that being said, there's the evidence coming back in from his civil deposition that is being used against him criminally. But he was still operating under the auspice that he could not be prosecuted. And the second scope that the Supreme Court for the state of Pennsylvania looked at was that DA Castor, quote, DA Castor agreed that Cosby wouldn't be prosecuted in order to force Cosby's testimony at deposition in Constand civil action. And then the formal public statement or the agreement that Cosby relied on, whether it be oral or written statements, and provided deposition testimony in the civil action, which again is what brought about the incrimination. So under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution, everyone has the right not to be compelled to self-incriminate themselves, meaning giving statements that may basically put them in prosecutorial way or incriminate themselves as far as wrongdoing in a criminal matter. And so that's why the Fifth Amendment is at crux here. And so after reading through this, and I want us to understand as regular lay people, is that the Supreme Court, taking upon those two issues that were appealed all the way up to the Supreme Court, they found that they looked at the equitable objectiveness and remedy of due process of the violation that was under the Fifth Amendment. So when he testified in the deposition in the civil matter, he didn't have due process as the prosecutor at that time sought to, how he set it up or structured it by him not being criminally prosecuted, that would compel him without his Fifth Amendment right to participate and provide truthful testimony in the civil litigation. And long story short, the Supreme Court looked at that and said, no, that is a violation of due process. That's a violation of the Fifth Amendment based on those two. And also what was interesting to me, I'm no attorney, no paralegal, but in the opinion, it talked about some type of immunity, which basically the Supreme Court saw that the DA at that time, back then, Castor, they compared it or looked at it as him giving some type of transactional immunity by Cosby testifying in the civil deposition or giving testimony in that deposition. So it was very interesting. And as I've been talking to others, how could this happen? The injustice, although the jury found him guilty, why is this occurring? That is the crux of it. And the Supreme Court stated that the impact of the due process violation here is vast. The remedy must match the impact, end quote. And they continued on and said that there is only one remedy that can completely restore Cosby to the status quo ante. That's a legal term. I'm not saying that I know what it is. I'm not pretending I'm reading from the opinion. He, being Cosby, must be discharged, and any future prosecution on these particular charges must be barred, which means that Cosby cannot be prosecuted again for the matter as it relates to Constand, which was the victim that initially came forth. So I brought that to you to say that, as we have protesters and we have us that are standing for justice and fighting for right and inequalities. I look at this as two justice systems. We have the Constitution, the amendments that we are provided as U.S. citizens, and then we look at the discretionary power of the prosecutors. And I ask the question, the discretionary power that DA Castor used back then in 2005, when he decided when he declined charges, is that afforded to every citizen that's caught in the criminal justice system? So when we look at this, knowing a little bit more about the situation, is everyone afforded that same equality or that same equity or fairness as dealing with the prosecutorial discretion for crimes that are alleged or may have been committed? And of course, you are innocent until proven guilty. But it makes me look at, is that afforded to everyone? And with what's going on, even with the Innocence Projects and things of that nature, we see that isn't true, which is why the justice system needs to be reformed. And you also look at, irregardless of gender, wealth, or status, yes, we're dealing with a high-profile figure. If you don't have money at disposable, if you don't have the status, would that discretionary power not to bring forth a prosecution and move it over to the civil part, as it was done in specifically this case, is that afforded to everybody? And that is what we're looking at when we're dealing with the inequalities, the equitableness as what is deemed just. We have to look at that and say, would this happen for everybody despite fame or fortune? Do we all have a fair shake? And I believe most of us say no, based off of the times that we're living in, based off of history, based off of things that has been going on. And that is why you have so many activists, including myself, that seek to change the legal system and just make the reform fair and justice equitable for all. Secondly, as I stated earlier, the victims that came forward, I commend them, and we want to continue to have victims to come forward at all times when they have been sexually assaulted or they've been victimized of any crime. That is equally important, and I hope that this procedural or technical matter in which Bill Cosby has been released today, I hope that this does not deter any victim from going forward and speaking to law enforcement when they have been a victim of a crime, no matter the date, the time, their age. Please speak your voice. Your voice is your power, and it matters. And so I just wanted to come to you today just to sum that up and look at and have you to think about, are we all afforded that same equality? And if not, what are you doing about it? I always say, think of something new, embrace something new. And this is a new perspective and how we have to look at it. Please don't be upset because he got off, and I can't tell you how to feel. But when we look at it from the legal ramifications, this is why we have democracy and we have checks and balances on systems. And it worked here because there was a Fifth Amendment violation in due process. And so the system worked, but it may not have worked according to how others may feel. But we have to look at the legality of everything. And what does the Constitution say? What does the amendment say? And we have to go from there. And like I said, our voice is our power. I have been guilty of it, of not voting at every local election, county, state, but that is where it starts, on the local level. So I wanted to come to you today with that assessment and say, use your voice. If you don't know how to use your voice, find your voice. There, it is within you. It is within you, and God has given each person a voice. So thank you for listening and paying attention to this video. Hi, Alan. I appreciate you watching. And I hope that, me giving you some background as to why he was released today gives you a better sense of understanding the justice system. I am Rita Latrice with Square Root Justice. Thanks for watching.